Justin asked me to speak here, we started going over, I said, what do you want to talk about? And he just said, let's just talk about some really cool things that are happening around the entire country with open data. And I first want to also thank Kathy as well. The DNR in the state of Wisconsin is starting to get it. They're starting to understand that the data that's been behind their own silos, that we all look at on computer monitors, can now be open to the public. It can become transparent, and we can really do some amazing things with it. So I'm here, my name is Scott Resnick. I'm the pro tem or the vice president of the Madison City Council. I'm also the youngest city council member for any city that's in the top 50 cities in the nation. So I'm also one of the youngest as well. I represent the UW-Madison campus, which I would say is the most fun place you could be on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday night in Madison. It's also a very quiet place on Sunday mornings. I can promise you, no matter where you are in the state, we have more going on a Saturday night than you can possibly imagine in my district. But as a city council member, I also started a company, which someone here also asked me to just talk about briefly. I'm an entrepreneur. I started out when I was 19 years old trying to become food. We had this great idea to be able to show TV shows online. And this is something that wasn't done before. You couldn't, you miss a show on ABC, you wait for the reruns. We discovered a way to figure out how to fast forward for that video. And that was the big break that people were sort of waiting for on upper speeds to say, we want to be able to, watch a video online and stream it. So, like any good entrepreneur at 19 years old, we found a way to illegally run it off of the computers at the UW Humanities building. We knew the exact bandwidth that we were going to get caught. So probably we wouldn't be kicked off the campus if we got caught, but we never would have been able to log in using our UW IDs. That company, it was called InZoom, and you've never heard of it because it didn't work out. But our second company we ended up creating after that ended up focusing on building first Facebook applications and iPhone and Android apps. We've now we now have 17 employees over by James Madison Park here in Madison. We do work for Mercedes-Benz, Coleman Campers, FedEx, both on iPhone and Android apps, as well as real estate handlers. So I come to the Madison City Council with a very different perspective. So as you're talking about making easy sells on IT, I think I might be the one city council member who keeps on advocating to add positions to our IT department to focus on things like data, on data quality, and understanding what it actually takes to go that next level. So I'm here this morning to talk about open data. This is Wikipedia's quote on what is open data. Open data is the idea that certain data should be freely available to anyone to use, republish as they wish, without restrictions from copyright, patents, and other mechanisms of control. And really, to summarize what that means, is actually we just don't want to see any PDF files. As developers, there's nothing you can do with PDF. Whether you're trying to scrape it itself for the data, valuable data sets that come out of it, we want the raw files themselves. Whether that's anything from an Excel file to a CSV file, whether it's your ArcGIS information that we can build to something cool with. And, many of these data sets are not controversial at all. Sometimes you have to make the sell to policymakers of why should you release any of this information? Why would, and there's some great examples of this. Historically, weather information. Back in the early 90s, there were many detailed conversations, and Democrats and Republicans could agree on this to say, first of all, who would ever want to create weather information and make that publicly available? In the early 90s, just go to your radio station. You have TV stations. Why should developers use it? And essentially, the conversation in Congress became, yeah, sure, if you want it, it's not going to cost us anything to share it with you. Go have at it. And from that, Weather Underground was created, and Weather.com. Those two companies right now together are worth over $1 billion. Every single time you look at your smartphone and you see that information that comes in of what's the temperature going to be like, the 5-day forecast, that was the origins of open data. You know, the other one, and this is technology developed by the CIA, which was GPS information. And again, back in the early 90s, the conversation was, why would anybody want to know where you are? And also at the time, that, you know, the satellite technology wasn't as accurate as it is now. All you were looking at is, you know, we can get, you know, figure out within 2,000 meters of where you are, here's a relative position for one single vehicle. Sure enough, the CIA declassified much of this information. We had the information that was presented to us publicly, and now you have TomTom. And now TomTom's being innovative, you know, to look at what you can do just through Google when you look at what transportation maps are out there. All of this started out with open data. So it really comes down to 3 points. It's the transparency, it's the efficiency, and it's the economic benefits of open data. And I want to go share about who's doing this around the country. So right here is the map. All of the states in orange have actually an open data policy. This may be not accurate for about 6 months, but 37 other states have an open data policy that's mandated by the states, the state agencies, everything from the DNR, the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, Health and Human Services. Any state agency would be forced to release many of these non-controversial data sets. The blue dots represent cities. There's a few counties involved. Cook County in Illinois, whatever county that Seattle, Washington's in. But we really see it, you know, both the new ideas coming from the state level and the cities right now. So Madison actually became the second city in the nation to codify our open data policy. The first city was New York, and we proceeded to pretty much take word for word New York City's policy. Like any great city, we share this legislative knowledge. And we ended up pushing through a policy here in Madison that says any information that does not contain personally identifiable information will be released to the public. Essentially, this was passed in 2012. We've now seen other cities follow the same lead as Madison, put available to the public. So this wasn't the easiest piece of legislation as a first, this was actually within my first term. I started trying to push this within my first year. As different agencies throughout the entire city started to have issues with this. The cost was actually somewhat arbitrary. It was a small cost to it. $40,000 in city time, for the vendor service that actually releases the data set. But a lot of city staff members have a number of concerns. One, what's the quality of the data that we're releasing? These are data sets that have never been open to the public. How are we going to explain to the public what's the data that we're actually looking at? The police department had a number of issues with personally identifiable information, whether that means someone's land records. The one that we're actually fighting about is a scenario of a stalking victim, and should we figure out if their car is being towed, because that could, release something to an individual who might have stalking issues or other criminal misuses of the information. Eventually, we were able to get it passed. And this is actually the open data portal. So from this site right here, developers have access to any one of our data sets that we make public. Right now we're at 70 data sets. The city of Chicago, which I'm going to speak about because they're doing some really forward thinking on this, have about 900 data sets. And most of these data sets, it's sometimes hard to figure out how we find value in them, and that's why I'm going to talk about a few different apps that were created. So right here is actually just the number of armed robberies in the city of Madison. We actually have full 911 data where you can click at any given time to actually figure out what 911 calls are coming in to the city. People have used this information to make their constituents, or at least my constituents, aware of what's going on around them, figuring out historic trends and what's going on in the city. What problems do we have that we're solving? Which ones are we failing? You can see the full drill down menu. So this information is coming from our New World system essentially passed into our open data portal, and every single record is available to the general public. And you start to build apps with this. Now, I don't want to actually show Madison's crime information because not to point out where we're failing as a city, but let's point to Chicago because there's some few easy examples of Chicago's crime. So this is actually what someone built on top of the same exact data. And what you're looking at on the middle of the screen are each one of the wards. And you can actually see which wards have high crime and low crime. The map right below that is actually showing you a heat map of what day of the week, first according to a calendar, and then later on what types of crimes. So if you look, the blue dot that's in the upper left-hand corner is on January 1st. And you can think about that. This is the north side of Chicago. This is inside the Bar District. And you could imagine on New Year's, that's one of the highest points of crime. You know, something else interesting is if you look at March, as St. Patty's Day is coming up, you also see the next highest concentration of blue, which means the most crime, is on St. Patrick's Day in this district. Really interesting information. Theft is there far away, and you can't really see it down in the corner, but you can actually drill in and see that theft is the #1 piece of crime that's going on in Chicago in this area. Now I point to another district where you see different crime statistics. And here you find drug abuse, simple battery, theft is actually #3. You can pick out so much and you can inform the public so much of what's going around you just by releasing these data sets. You know, one question that you ask so often, particularly with Chicago, is crime getting better or worse? Because you see that district, you see drugs are the #1 issue. Well, here's the historic information dating back to 2004 on crime data in that same exact area related to drugs. And sure enough, it's trending down. So the data sets that are being released are not only showing and transparently showing that there is crime, but it's actually improving in Chicago. Now that was sort of an interesting example. One that's in Chicago that we had a discussion about should we bring it to Madison is this is all the snowplow data in the city of Chicago. So the city of Chicago decided to release the GPS position of each single one of their snowplows. In Chicago, they're owned by the municipality. Due to corruption and a few other things that only happen in Chicago, they wanted to be very transparent that the snowplows are actually working. And you can read about the snowplow contracts and the mob and Chicago. It's a fun story. But they wanted, a number of city council members said it's really important that we show the public what our snowplows are doing. So the city of Chicago released the GPS location of where a snowplow is. And that tells you almost nothing about the snowplow. So a developer in the community said, hey, I bet I can track this over time. And then if I track it every 10 minutes where that snowplow is, I can build a map, true to date, where the snowplows are driving, and if your driveway has been cleared yet. And what are the chances that driveway is going to be cleared again? So if you don't want to shovel and you want to use the snowplow map, here it is. This is actually taken from last night. It's not snowing in Chicago right now. None of their plows are on the streets. But if it was snowing right now, and I can grab a screenshot, I would be able to show you exactly where their plows are, true to date. You can see the whole city light up. You can also see the neighborhoods. They get the first priority attention with the snow plows, the second, and then those areas that you can very clearly see never have plows. So this is another interesting information. So we have an issue in Madison with our fire hydrants. And this is the issue that we have, that during the winter time, the snow piles up by the fire hydrants, and we don't have the property owners. Many property owners are taking their responsibility to shovel out their hydrants. Now, this project was called Adopt a Fire Hydrant, and it started in Boston. And what you can do, and as silly as this may sound, is you can adopt a fire hydrant in your neighborhood. And basically, we have a call to action for members of our community actually to go in there and plow out their neighbor's fire hydrant, particularly for some of our most elderly citizens who still live in their home.
getting the shovel out and clearing out fire hydrants is a daunting task. So this was an application that was created with our fire department data. We went through painstaking measures with our fire department to release this information. Eventually they said, well, what happens if this information gets in the hands of the wrong people? What could you do with all our fire hydrants? And there were two conversations with that. One, you can also figure out where our fire hydrants are by looking at where our fire hydrants are. It's really not a secret data set at all. You do a really bad job at hiding our fire hydrants. I didn't understand that one. There was this terrorist threat. I didn't understand that either. Again, you clearly know where the fire hydrants are. We released this program. Again, all the fire department did was it released their Excel file that they knew where all the fire hydrants were. And we had a developer in the community who developed this for no cost to the city of Madison. And sure enough, no one ended up adopting really any fire hydrants. But the same exact code base was used in Hawaii. And in Honolulu, in fact, they have a different issue. It's not fire hydrants, but it's the sirens that they have. And the tsunami sirens that they have, it's a very protected and careful area there. They have their sirens that go off, and people keep on stealing the batteries. And it's one of these really, apparently you can sell these batteries for several $1,000s in the open battery market, black markets of batteries. So people would be stealing the batteries. So they used the same exact code, and it took them it took right around 3 days to take this exact project and have citizens go out to the different siren posts, adopt a siren post, look up and say, is there a battery up there? And when there's a battery that's missing, to go report it. That not only cut down on city staff time in Honolulu, I've actually moved those county issue in Honolulu, county staff time to go check the batteries, the testing, and they really saw a lot of compliance because citizens were more aware of, wow, people are stealing the batteries and it's costing taxpayer dollars to go replace them. And what you're seeing right here is a program called Git, and this is called GitHub. And if you're not familiar with it, it's basically the gold standard of the development community. Many programmers volunteer their time, and just like others can go volunteer their time shoveling up a driveway, programmers love volunteering their time and giving back with code. So this is an open source community where we just simply share our code. Any of the projects that are done here in Madison, we send it out to the entire public. So if all of a sudden, in Mayfield County, they need to adopt a fire hydrant, as long as they take our code, and they probably should change the word from Madison to not Madison, they can go and take our code for free. And we actually encourage people to steal our code and take it and repurpose it. And as long as you give credit back, that's all we're really looking for. This is an interesting one that we're trying to implement here in Madison. And a number of cities have done it. This is with health data on restaurants. So this is called Don't Eat At. And what this does is if you're a little cautious of a restaurant that you walk into, and you want to find out, did they actually pass their health inspection? This is information that's sitting in Dane County and probably in every single one of your county databases. Basically, New York and the state of New York decided to open source this information and put it out there to the public. And developers have now created so many text messaging apps where sure enough, you can take either your address or the restaurant, and it will send back the health score that they last had. I ended up using this for the first time when I was in Chicago, which also had the same program. And sure enough, you actually don't want to find out health violations. When all of a sudden you learn this is what their issues are with rodents, and then you really decide, all right, I'm never going to eat this food truck ever again. We have some issues in Madison about hot dog stands. I sit on the vending oversight committee as well, so I could talk all about hot dog trucks. I really digress on that one. But all of these apps were created just for the public releasing the data. San Francisco, parking information. parking in the city of San Francisco is nearly impossible. So what they've ended up doing is both public and private lots, putting out what's the probability that you're going to find a parking spot on this street in San Francisco. Right now, the city of Madison is doing that, and I can look at my phone and tell you with the government use ramp how many parking spots are available. And if it's full, don't waste your time trying to get into the loop. And really the goal there is to take cars off the road. Yes, it's a conveniency factor, but it's really trying to think about how can we change the way people are using our parking utility in Madison. These are some, two of these next ones are sort of interesting. This one right here is the zoning, and someone decided, how can I try to convince people in the city of Chicago that zoning is cool and important? So you're looking at the green, yellow, and blue, very much so, of residential, commercial, and industrial. And they decided to create a website to make their neighbors involved, to make them more involved in what the decision is, and they decided to make it all like SimCity. So this is a SimCity replica of the city of Chicago. It actually plays the SimCity music in the background. So if you ever played that game, very iconic matchup game. For myself, that's one of the things that I grew up on. You can actually see Chicago, life that makes it to the general public starting to understand zoning. These are cool maps because they found a way to make a cool customization of it. These are all the building permits in the city of Chicago. So you can look at what types of permits are being issued. Similarly, these are all the violations that the city of Chicago has issued. And you can actually find, neighborhoods that have more issues in it. But I bring these examples up because if we wanted to implement this in Madison, it would take us a week. And it would be a week of volunteers who would be able to put this in place. Because all the hard parts of this application have already been created. All you need to do is customize your data and be able to put it in. Bike maps. This is a cool project in Atlanta. And what you can do is actually figure out, depending on what kind of rider you are, whether you're a strong and fearless rider down to recreational rider, if you dare ride on a highway in Atlanta, which I cannot imagine would be a good idea just thinking about it, you can actually create what your perfect cycling maps are. And all this is using is pathway information, ArcGIS information from the city of Atlanta, and Google Maps. And this is the last app that I want to just talk about here. And this is probably when you're looking at cost-saving arguments. This was a developer named Greg Tracy in town. And Greg is just a phenomenal developer. Right now he's working on a project, he's the CTO of a company that tracks asthma inhalers. So essentially, figure out when you use an asthma inhaler, are there things in your community that may impact asthma? And sure enough, there are areas of your cities throughout the country. If you live in that area, you're going to see a higher rate of using an asthma inhaler. And this is some phenomenal research, won some amazing grants by IBM. But he has an issue of his own, and he said he hates waiting for the bus. And really, one of the worst parts about riding a bus is waiting for it. If you don't know when that bus is coming, it can be painstakingly long as you try to worry about when the bus break down, when's the next one coming, how long am I going to be waiting out here in the cold. Madison is not a fun place to be waiting for the bus. So he decided to build an app. It'll allow him to essentially screen scrape some of our metro information. The city of our metro department was not thrilled with him when he first did this. But basically create an app for himself personally to figure out when's my next bus coming. So sure enough, he put it out there and he created an API, which essentially we call SMS My Bus, which is essentially text message when the next bus is coming. Well, shortly after that, there was an app developer who said, this is really cool information. I bet I could show everybody when every bus is coming. So if you're looking on the left side, and if you're an Android user, it's Madison Bus Radar. It's actually a bus radar app that shows real time when your bus is going to come. So you can see literally, and if you look at the left side, that little thing that looks like a bus is a bus. Those are each one of the bus stops. And if you click on that bus stop, you can get an ETA of when that bus is going to Sure enough, someone said, this is a phenomenal idea, but I would love to get this in my coffee shop. Over on Michelangelo, say, for a coffee shop downtown, they said, I want people to wait for the bus. I want them to know exactly how long they can be sitting in my coffee shop and not out at the bus stop waiting. So this was the second app that was created called Madison Metro Monitor. And sure enough, you have eastbound and westbound times, each single bus, and how many minutes till the next one arrives. And sure enough, if you look at a westbound bus, and if you have 30 minutes to stay in that coffee shop, instead of 5, you have a new customer. These have been getting more and more advanced. This is a Windows Mobile. I don't know how many people have a Windows Mobile phone. Someone has to have it. I have an Android. Everybody in my office has an iPhone. This is a Windows Mobile app that can show you exactly what the bus information has. And I'll actually show you how effective this is. In real time, this is a heat map. I started this at the beginning of my presentation. So since then, every red dot that you see on the map is someone who's been looking for a bus. They hit our API, and as you see the little explosions on the map, that's someone right now that's actually figuring out on one of these mobile apps who's looking for a bus right now, whether they're text messaging it in, whether they're looking at it as a coffee shop, whether they're using it on the phone. Picnic Point, if you see that little shop in the Isthmus, and that wraps around, that's the UW-Madison campus. Right to the southwest of that is our downtown. And you can see, right now as folks are downtown riding the bus, exactly who's using this application. Is anybody here from Milwaukee County? I'm just curious. Oh, good, because this story is going to sound so embarrassing for Milwaukee. So, the city of Madison built this application. City staff time to make sure that we have the right vendor, putting all these pieces together. We had some kind of estimate of about $150,000, a one-time cost, probably $30,000, keeping our GPS on each one of our buses. These were some costs. We were going to GPS or track our buses no matter what. By having the private community do this, the development community, we ended up saving about $500,000 on our Metro bus budget. And we know that because that's what Milwaukee County's public transportation system is doing right now to implement what we've already done in Madison. Right now, we've had 2 million users at some point figure out where's my bus in the last 2 years. If you want to see our greatest accomplishment in building data, it's this right here. We hope to pass the 3 million mark sometime this summer, and it's only increasing, and it's actually revolutionizing the way we run it. Metro bus users are using the system. One of our feedback from our Metro department has been, now people don't have to wait. So that we're seeing ridership go up in the youngest demographics because they have phones and they don't want to wait for the bus, and it is still the cheapest solution. So, there are things that cities can also do, even if you don't have the same budget that the city of Madison has. This is called crowdsourcing. These are 2 different projects, but we don't have the budget to implement a really cool iPhone solution to. Emerald Ash. We had our first recorded sighting of Emerald Ash here in the city of Madison, so getting ready to cut down our ash trees. We put down $750,000 in our budget, our capital budget last year to address this issue. But we ended up having a former park ranger who came up with this idea. He said, we know where all the public trees are. What about the private trees? So this is a crowdsourcing method on the left. It's just a Google map and a Google document for members of the public to identify where their ash trees are. And other members of the public to tell them, in fact, this is an ash tree, or no, you have no clue what an ash tree looks like. So the green are confirmed. You see a little red dot there. That means someone doesn't know what an ash tree is. And through crowdsourcing, we have other members of the community from our botany department that have signed up to help out here. On the right side, this is food pantries. And this is areas of food pantries where you can end up donating food. And this was just from one individual saying, all right, I can't find a good way to just figure out where I can share this information. Both of these solutions, the cost for both of these solutions, cost in time or cost in dollars, less than $50. We also did something called idea scale. If you want a really easy piece, and this is through a vendor, it costs about $150 a month to run. But in our last budgeting process, we ended up putting out idea scale. And what we started to do is we asked our members of our public just to say, what do you want us to improve on? An idea scale, we just said, throw out any idea that you have that we should include in our budget. Expanding a makerspace in the city of Madison, Sector 67. Our members of our public wanted Google Fiber. Everybody wants Google Fiber. We didn't deliver on that promise. Make it less attractive to own empty buildings. So we ended up getting all kinds of ideas. Really good ones and some really not so good ideas when you just ask anybody from the public. Eliminate all Alders is also an idea that was on this idea scale website. But really the number one idea was expand curbside composting. And sure enough, what we had, we were looking through our budget. It was currently piloted in 2 neighborhoods. And we were trying to figure out what to do with that last $40,000. We ended up expanding curbside composting. But the reason why this was important was what we ended up doing in the outcome of participation. In our budget process, we ended up spending 300 staff hours just on public outreach in Madison, just so the public knows what we're budgeting on. We have a 0.055% participation at those meetings. It means no one is showing up. It's almost painful how few members of the public participate. But just doing idea scale, we cut the number of meetings in half, and we almost tripled the amount of participation because people simply at home in their spare time, while they're on Facebook, could go ahead and actually vote up and down ideas that we were actually budgeting. It became a huge political drive for our leaders. So for my other fellow council members, the next IT initiative that I had a lot more support from other members that never supported me in the past. So really, I'll close with what's next for Wisconsin. And I would really love to see Wisconsin be on that forefront and also release their data sets. Data sets like the DOT has. Anything from, I just have a full list of what data sets that we have. Rest areas, mileposts, public health information, in public health, licensed assisted living facilities, nursing home agency, hospice directories, hospital information. In the DNR, you have fishing spots, you have recreational trails, you have hiking trails. All these pieces, it's great that they're on the iPhone app, it's great that they're on the Android app, but also let developers and communities take a crack at what snowmobile trails are open. Because you're going to find some enthusiasts out there that will do your work for you, and they will just build this because they care about it. Just like bus information is very important to some of our technologists here in Madison, I'm sure there's enthusiasts that care more about fishing than anything else in life, and they have to work in the tech space. So, with that, I want to thank you for your time today. I do understand all the turmoils dealing with Dane County supervisors on some, similar issues and our planning department. So I do want to thank you just as the service that you give. And if there's any questions about open data or other things that you can do, I'll be around and feel free to reach out. So thank you for your time today.